went out once a quarter.
Yeah.
So there's certainly a trade-off, and you know, I get hundreds of emails a day as well, but it's important to me to know what's going on in the neighborhood. It's important to me to review the voice, and I am Facebook friends with the Civic Association, and I get emails, and I have discussions with my neighbors and friends in the neighborhood. So I think it's perhaps inaccurate to think that a mailing would have reached more people. I throw away my mail every day. If I get a random flyer from a real estate agent, I don't read it. If I get a one-pager, I don't read it. I think there are a lot of people that pay more attention to email than
Yeah, I actually wasn't asking your
copies.
personal opinion about what you mail.
Well, no, I'm saying, I think
How many quantifiably?
I'll have to get Mr. Becker to answer your question about how many people signed up, and regrettably.
Just roughly, ballpark.
I actually don't know.
we have a communications,
We'll be glad to get it to you.
yeah, we have a communications chair.
But if I want a point of clarification, I want to make sure I understand, because I didn't follow some of that. Did the board evaluate sending these by mail, U.S. Postal Service, and did it decide no?
We looked at the information, and we talked about it as a possibility, looked at the returns we got from the last time we went door to door or did a mailing. And we decided that we did not see any predictable advantage to approaching it that way, and I still do not believe there was one. And it was not the cost that mattered. We can easily afford to do that. We just didn't think it was going to produce any response based on examples we've seen. Lastly, about going back to a printed voice, I mean, the voice was out of date before anybody picked it up for the most part.
To be clear, I was not suggesting...
Yes, thank you, sir. Ms. Kaufman.
Yeah, I would just like to say, I went door to door because I was trying to get names on the petition for the accessory dwelling. And I was really kind of surprised when I talked to my neighbors, who most of them were online. Really, they didn't know about the master plan. And I was kind of embarrassed because I had to explain the whole master plan to them. So I really believe, in hindsight, and it's not to diminish your efforts, that a mailing should have gone out to everyone just to say you did it, and in fact that you would have reached a lot of people that you do not reach an email. I'm sorry. I think that there are a couple populations that we should look at. One is young people renting on Greenwood that never plug into our neighborhood, but nevertheless we should consider them. And the second population is the elderly, who are not on email. And for those reasons, I think that if we do this again, at least one mailing should go out which directs people for more information. I just think that should have been done. And like I say, I was shocked when I went and talked to my neighbors. They didn't know anything about it. You know, I mean, it was really very surprising to me.
Sir, Mr. Burrow.
Peter Curl. So apparently you must have a list of all the addresses in the neighborhood, so you know who to mail things to. But when someone moves into this neighborhood, how do they get registered for an email? I mean, how do they even know? I mean, we have people coming and going, and people buying houses. How do they be aware of the association? And if you're not mailing people, you would know where the addresses are, but don't have the email addresses. How do you get those? How do you make sure people are signed up?
I'll let Ms. Bird respond a little bit to that, and then you, ma'am. Go ahead.
Brian McCarthy, I live in Mill Drive and Park Drive, and I moved here, new to the neighborhood, and I wanted to know about where I live. I met the neighbors, they told me about the next door communication. I lived down the road, saw people doing crazy things. It was important for me to know about where I lived, and I pursued that. I appreciate what this woman on the front row said. It became my responsibility. I knew nothing of this process. I didn't know about a master plan. I just knew that I had just moved here, and I wanted to know what was going on.
There's more to that, though. Peggy, go ahead.
So we actually, as a board, we have been concerned about that, and we want not just to expand the distribution of information to people that own property, but also to people that rent. So we hire a service that sends out flyers as part of a packet of new neighbor flyers to everybody that moves into the neighborhood, whether they're renters or whether they're buyers. So they get at least one flyer when they when they move in. We've also been working on the street captain program, Eleanor and I have, to try and increase our participation from apartment complexes so that when people move into apartment complexes, they're told about the neighborhood association and invited to participate in the street captain program and the voice. So in the last couple weeks, I think we've added 2-3 apartment complexes. So we're working on that, and I've got to say it's a slow process. It means me going around and finding out who manages the complex, and then setting up a meeting with them, and then talking to them about it, and then seeing if I can bring them into that service. So it's been a positive response, but it's not been easy, it's not yet complete, and it's very time consuming. But it is something we're working on, and we have been for a while.
Sir.
Jonathan Blackberry of Highland Terrace. What you're talking about, a lot of it falls on voluntary effort. I'm a landlord, and I know other landlords who make the effort when new tenants move in, that they give them information about the civic association, neighborhood events, and summer fest, and all of that. I've got my own personal flyer that I get out to tenants that has all that information in there, so that they know, they're aware, they become part of the neighborhood. I've got new neighbors on my street that I've made the effort to tell. When they ask a question, I say, oh, we got a civic association meeting coming up next week, and that kind of thing. So you try to, it's just a matter of voluntary communication.
I got the flyer.
Could you re-identify yourself?
I'm sorry, Emily, I live at 1170 North Highland Avenue. I got the flyer in the mail. I went, as a result, then I went to the Civic Association website, I signed up, I got the emails, and that was how I personally got invited to 5 or 6 meetings, well, 4 or 5 different meetings about asking for my input about that.
Hey, something's worked, I love it.
Yeah,
Ma'am.
Just since we want statistics and we want to quantify, just the Pew Internet is a charitable foundation that specializes in research on Americans online, and they say that 86% of all adults are online, and 60% of all people 65 and older are now online. So in a neighborhood like ours with a higher than average socioeconomic income, it's likely to be higher. So I think one of the reasons to consider a very vigorous online presence is that that's where the majority of Americans are trending. This has just been going up. So I just wanted to throw out some figures to give people a feel for where people are.
Sir.
And we'd just like to build up that. My name is Tom Tamaka at 1103 Lanier, and if you say 80% of American adults are online, Microsoft Corporation did a study nationally of the degree to which broadband's penetrated residential areas in Atlanta is the top metropolitan area for internet penetration. So yes, there may be some people who aren't online, but y'all, this is the second decade of the 21st century, and we're online. We just may not be making our civic participation a priority. And I don't know by sending mass mail to people if they're going to be pulling out that piece of mail from this civic association above all the offers to refinance their mortgages and do a better job in the bedroom.
Just one second, this woman had her hand come back. Yes, ma'am.
I still think it would be a good point of information to know how many households there are, for the board to know, just to know how many households there are and how many email addresses that are available, so you have an idea of how many people you're reaching.
This, I can assure you we're intensely curious about that, even though we're not exactly sure.
Our communications person couldn't make it to this meeting, but the guy on the board, John Becker, who is the communications guy, he had a prior engagement, so he couldn't make it tonight, and he's the one who sends out all the emails. So it's not that we don't want to give you that number. We don't have it, but we can get it.
Oh, it would be nice to
put
it in the next.
If you come up afterwards and give me your name and number.
If you put it in, I read the online newsletter all the time.
Okay, great.
If you just put it in there, then everybody will know.
Great.
Yes, sir.
Keith Edwards, I just want to say, I feel like
board has done an excellent job of communicating. I feel like I've heard about the master plan over a period of several months. On several meetings, I've gone to the website, I've offered input on numerous revisions of this. So I just want to commend the board for doing a great job of reaching out to us, because I feel like you have done that.
Yes, ma'am.
Just 1.2. My name's Carrie Hobson. I'm Carrie Hobson Taylor. I'm at 750 Virginia Circle. But I also feel like this master plan has gone on for forever. I feel like it's just gone on and on. I've heard so much continuously about this master plan. And I mean, I work full time. I've got kids, a variety of volunteer positions, and I still have tried to kind of pop into a couple meetings here and there. I haven't read the full master plan simply because I haven't had the time to. But I showed up in September and I elected these guys, and I'm hoping that these guys are the ones that are spending the time doing that. What I don't understand, David, is this election, is that kind of assuming that my neighbors who I talk to about these things, and we've got a great street captain that informs our entire street about these meetings that are taking place and so on and so forth. But I just don't understand how these neighbors that haven't kind of personally engaged themselves in this process would necessarily know enough to even vote. Because I almost feel like it's only the people that have, that have kind of gotten involved and read the material, like yourself, and like all of the people here. I just don't understand how that would help me understand it.
Logically, it's the people that have been engaged and that are knowledgeable about the plan that are going to be the ones that do come out and vote.
Mm-hmm.
However, with the advanced notification about the vote,
Right.
I think there are some other people that haven't been engaged that would come out to vote as well. And I
Because
think
it's
just
a vote.
based on the amount of impact that everything in the plan is going to have on the neighborhood,
Yeah.
I think it's the right of everybody in the neighborhood to have to say about that, right, wrong, or indifferent. I very well may be in the minority about what I think about certain aspects of the plan I'm not comfortable with, but I would be much prefer that everybody be given an opportunity to have their say and vote on that than just have it be that the board does it because of the way the process was run.
But just so that I understand, and maybe I don't understand completely because I haven't had the opportunity to read all your emails, but are you asking people to vote on the entire master plan, or you just explained that it was all the individual details? Those details are kind of part of the charrette process and part of the meeting process and all the qualitative information that has been going on for the last 6, 7, 8 months, right?
There are 94, at least in the March 10th, and that's where and I'm sure the numbers changed a little bit, but there were approximately 94 recommendations, so it's voting on the recommendations themselves, not all the other information that's contained in the plan. So
Each one individually. That's what his petition says.
Approximately a 15-page ballot.
Right. And, yeah.
So I want to just get back to the point. I'm not trying to wind it up, I just want to make more comments that I can. But this is a classic sort of Virginia-Highland meeting with a lot of different opinions. And some people have criticisms of the process, and some of which are clearly worth thinking about, many of which are worth thinking about. Actually, I don't think they're even contradictory. I think that many of them can be simultaneously true. That it's possible that a lot of things were done well, some other things might have been done better. A lot of people know when they're engaged, a lot more people could have been, and that there's a huge percentage of folks that just don't react very much at all. That actually has been me at 1 or 2 points in my life when I was coaching soccer and being a parent. I was not very engaged in neighborhood life. Not indifferent, but not engaged. So I want to just go back, if we could, to the point about the straw vote, because one of the reasons I think, because everybody here's got a chance to speak and still can, but it's pretty clear that a rich diversity of opinion in here is pretty clear. And I think for this board has a lot of instruction and a lot of, helps us form what we need to do and learn what lessons, and we'll try to write them up about what needs to go forward. What I'm not clear about is what a straw vote in a situation like this tells us at all, other than the fact that we have a lot of different opinions. So there's some different opinions here. Does anybody else have anything else to say? That's one of the reasons we discontinued the straw vote and those sorts. Mr. Tarkin.
I'm Doug Tarkin with 75 Coolidge. I think Jack could probably make my argument for me, but I don't know that he would make it as forceful as I would. So, although I exchanged a number of messages, I was participating very early in the thought process. And at the risk of getting tomatoes thrown at me, I actually support pretty much all of the content in the plan. And I didn't in the beginning, and kind of shifted. So, but that is besides the point. The reason I came today, and I figured there were probably 100-to-1 odds against the board actually allowing a vote. And my concern is really that the board has used the bylaws, at least in my opinion, to deny the residents the right to vote. And that's something I find disturbing, and other people can disagree, and I'd like to say why. The attorney has said that you're not obligated to let people vote, right? But that doesn't mean that you can't do that. And Jack, you mentioned the straw vote, but what it looks like and what it feels like is the board is doing everything it can to try and make sure that residents don't vote. And it's bizarre to me, as somebody who supports it, I've said this in a letter to you all, I think the votes are there to pass it. And so it's very bizarre to me that you don't want to do it. And so, so there's this argument, the bylaws have been there for 40 years and they've served as well. And people have brought up Candler Park as an example. Candler Park does things differently. And so I went out to look at what the other neighborhood organizations do. Our Candler Park, is it a bunch of weirdos that they do it? But no. Morningside Lennox Park in Article 2, Section B allows their membership to vote. Midtown in Article 2, Section 2.6 allows their membership to vote. Candler Park in Article 6, Section 7 allow their members to vote. Inman Park in Article 1, Section C allow their members to vote. Virginia-Highland in Article 6, Section 6.1. It's not just that Candler Park is weird. They all do this. We are actually the exception, not the rule, in that we have very, very concentrated power in the board that can only be changed once a year. And so nobody's disputing that. And after looking at the bylaws and whatnot, I certainly don't dispute that. And one of the ideas is that we have this representative government. Even though we're different than everybody else, that is how we do things. But that, as a graduate student, past graduate student in political science, that's not entirely true. It is representative from the standpoint that once a year we elect you folks, in power. However, representative, if we're going to kind of pull out representative government, there are mechanisms of direct democracy in representative government. We have recalls, referendums, and we have these types of things. So you all have the power to allow a vote if you want to, but it's very clear you don't. And I guess, to me, that's what's disturbing, because I think you have the votes to pass. I will be out there campaigning with you to get this thing to pass, but I think it's somewhat disingenuous to not allow the vote, and everybody else does it, and just because our bylaws are 40 years old doesn't mean that they are perfect. I can come up with a number of 40-year-old things that need to be rotated out. So the product is good. But you all don't have the support to do it, and you're relying on some very, very restrictive interpretation of the bylaws. It makes it look bad, and you don't have to. And I think it would show a great deal of support if you would do that. It makes people suspicious that you won't.
Ms. Curry.
I have said this at the Virginia-Highland Civic Association twice. I have put it on the neighbor next door. You can vote on this. You need to come to the NPU meeting where it's a New England Town Hall democracy, and you can vote. I don't know what the big deal is. The NPU it's everybody that's in the NPU. That will not only include our neighborhood, but it will include the neighborhoods of Morningside, Lindridge, Martin Manor, Virginia-Highland.
Piedmont Heights.
Yeah, Piedmont Heights.
Ma'am, I spoke with Jane, the NPUF chair, on Easter. She said the NPUF vote is not binding. It's just essentially a straw vote as well.
Welcome to all Atlanta citizens.
Well, I know, sorry, I know. And
It's a recommendation, of course. Everything that we vote on is a recommendation. Of variances that.
Ma'am, this is a Virginia-Highland Civic Association neighborhood plan, not the Morningside or the Lindridge Park. This would be a more appropriate body, even if it's not you know, require. This would be the
I'm
appropriate
gonna let some other-
our group to vote on.
Other folks, I think you've already, I don't think
response.
I don't think I can do a better job than you did, so.
I'm trying to thank you.
We'll go in order. We'll go in order. You'll get some, you really will. Other people have their hands up. You will. I'm sorry, should I call on you and not the other three people first?
She asked you for a response.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Fraser Laura from Highland View and Disclosure. I am a member of the steering committee, and I think it's both. I appreciate your background in political science, me as well. I appreciate your being supportive, but to make the insinuation that the board is pulling something fast or sneaky about this whole thing, because the bylaws are very clear. I can appreciate that you can 10 other neighborhood associations that maybe have bylaws with it. These are our bylaws. The board has done nothing secretive, nothing to undermine this neighborhood, nothing to undermine anybody's support of what we're doing. But I do think it is very insulting to make that insinuation of us. Secondly, the fact that we had all these open meetings gives all the input that we've had. And you may laugh, but did you participate in the meetings? You did, right?
Yes. So first of all, I have a great respect for all these folks.
Hold on, just 1 second. We really have a lot of people who put their hands up. I'll be happy to get back to you, Doug.
He just asked me a question.
I know, but.
So yes or no answer, yes I did. I think you did.
Fraser, please just keep going here. Let's keep it moving. Because we'll get back to Doug and you're next. You're one person away.
But I have one other point.
Go ahead.
I have one other point to make before I'm finished. Thank you. That is, we do have the procedure in place to change the bylaws. We're what, 5 months out? Now that we've seen there are a group of people that feel like it's time to change the bylaws, good. Let's start that process. I have no problem whatsoever with changing the bylaws and putting it in line with what you think of whether we should have, community-wide votes. But everything we've done so far has been above board, and I don't see the humor in suggesting that we change the bylaws. You yourself said 40 years is long enough, perhaps it needs to be changed. Let's use that process to do it. We can change it at the next board meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
I just was going to say something similar to what he said, which is we can change the bylaws. And I would concur with you that accusing the board of not following, trying to bend the rules, they're trying to follow the rules. If you don't like the rules, change them. But if they were bending the rules, you'd get an uproar about that too. So they're trying to follow the rules. They even hired an attorney to make sure they're following the rules. So I don't think we should be accusing the board of anything. They're citizens, they're volunteers. Secondly, when you're changing the bylaws, you have to figure out the mechanism for the vote. And that needs to be in the bylaws. Is it somebody who's renting? Is it somebody who only owns property? Or is it only property owners? Is it commercial property owners? Is it, people who are staying with someone else or people who work in the neighborhood? Who gets to vote? You have to define all these things. And that's not something that can happen quickly. And that will have to be defined.
And so hang on 1 sec. We'll do this. It's good. Yes, ma'am. You had
That's
a
all I
comment?
have to say.
I appreciate you.
I'm Lloyd, I live on Rosedale Drive, and I was just interested in your response, and I don't think he was insulting, trying to insult anyone in any way.
I didn't feel insulted. Doug's a perfectly nice guy. We've corresponded.
I just don't see why he can't.
I'm not insulted. Look, one of the things I really appreciate about meetings in person is you really do not get the bombast and the over-the-top adjectives that make me just want to say, forget it. Okay? It really doesn't. There are people in this room that I have totally enjoyed meeting and hope will be very involved in this association in the future. And believe you me, until I met them personally, I would never have said that. After I met them, I was convinced of it. But before that, it's very different. I do want to reply to some of the points. Go ahead. You want to go ahead, please?
I was just going to say, I think Jack knows and everybody knows whatever your name is, sir.
Fraser.
Fraser. I like all these people, at least the ones that I know, and they know. And I'm in support of the plan. I'd be more than happy to help implement the plan. But I'm not going to back off of the idea that I don't agree with the governance, and I have never said that they have gone astray. I have said they are very skirting the very lines of what is possible in the bylaws, and I don't think that's inappropriate. You're allowed to do that. But I think there should be a vote, and that's really all there is.
I know you,
and so
clearly didn't believe that.
Go ahead.
I do want to. There was one answer that I really did not agree with. They were disingenuous. I don't think they're disingenuous at all.
If I said that,
I think you could not have been more straightforward and possible about it. Look, there are two things about. Absolutely, the board could stage a vote. They could figure out a mechanism or mechanisms and try to do it. We can have a vote right now.
Yes.
Right now, we can just take this vote. But it wouldn't be any more representative of the whole neighborhood, whatever this shows. I don't mind having the straw vote right now if that is advantage.
Let's just so they'll shut up.
Well, let's
I don't think a straw vote, I'll be happy to have it, and I don't think it's going to
What are you
change.
gonna ask? Did we communicate properly? Did we?
No,
like,
probably down the whole.
It's about the master plan for now. That was the.
But I want to reply to Doug's points, because I enjoyed reading him. He made a good logical set of arguments. People are suspicious. People are suspicious. Actually, of the huge number of letters that we got in support of them, they didn't sound suspicious. They sounded thankful and grateful. That this is that they're 40 years old. They've been amended repeatedly, most recently 2 years ago. For better or for worse, it's not as if that we had to go dig through some ancient cellar and dust them off to find them. We operate and we pay a lot of attention to them. That doesn't mean they can't be amended, but they're not some dusty relic. The comparison to other neighborhoods. This is an interesting piece of political science, and I would really be, it is a hellacious discussion. I would be glad to have it. I think we can have a meeting about that, and I think it would be very, very informative. By the way, in this neighborhood, at the risk of insulting anyone, to paraphrase Monty Python, you're a citizen here, and the moment you set your suitcase down, there is no requirement. All you have to do is be 18 years old and a resident. You do not pay money, as Candler Park did until a couple of years ago, when they were forced to change by NPUN, not even of their own volition. You do not have to register, as you do in Candler Park. You just walk in with a piece of identification, and we believe you. You get your meal at Summerfest, you vote at the election, whatever the mighty prerogatives are, you can elect officers. That's it. It is the most open, democratic form of any one that I know. There's never been a nickel paid, and it's been that way from day one. Donations are accepted. That's also true at NPUF, and it's not true at NPUB to our north, E to our west, and N to our south, all of which do representative voting. So it's not that the process is exactly, we're not the only group around here doing it. A number of groups do it. Many other NPUs, not F, and not inconspicuously because of the efforts and opinions and vehemence of people in Virginia-Highland, have requirements that in order to vote, you have to have attended 2 or 3 prior meetings in the previous 12 years. We have the most ultra-democratic NPU in the city and one of the best runs, and we fully believe in that form of democracy. And I actually have real objections to the representative piece at NPUs because of the way the legislation was written that founded NPUs. It is for direct citizen input, as Ms. Curry described it. The changes, we could have designed this from the get-go as a popular vote, like a referendum or election. We would have designed a very, very different campaign, not to reach anyone less. But we did it this other way, this iterative process, because we were actually convinced from looking at other neighborhoods that it was by far the healthiest and best and most informative way to approach the problem. Do not minimize controversy, as Mr. Tarkington suggested in his letter to me. Please, not even mention the plan. We'll get more votes. We don't do it that way, Doug, and I wouldn't do it that way ever. We would actually rather have the discussion and the debate and let people be informed and move on, whatever direction they move on to, based on knowledge and reality, than try to soft pedal it. That has been the approach we've always taken here. Inform, 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 and let the chips fall where they may. We think that the process was designed, we never asked people to vote, we didn't implore them to vote, we didn't say there would be a vote at the end. We asked for their input and participation through the power of their ideas and the examination of the other things that were put in front of them. We've gotten a lot of it. Some of it extremely detailed, some people with a lot of effort on a very specific point to make sure that they got their pieces across. I think that process produces the strongest possible plan. To change it in the middle, at the 9/10 mark of it, and say now at the end we're going to take a vote on all of this stuff, to me does not in any way reflect a more representative form of response than we already have. Lastly, we are convinced, I am convinced, I'll only speak for myself, that this plan enjoys, like you sir, I am convinced that this plan enjoys enormous wide support. And I think the values of this plan will be reflected in what occurs in future years in this neighborhood, with or without the equity, citizen equity that you point out. Actually, I'm not opposed to citizen equity, but if you get results that are strong and positive for your neighborhood, as so many people have told us, that occurs whether or not any individual voted for them or not. And so that is it. I'm not afraid of any vote. Secondly, we're going to have a vote on September
18th, I think?
the third Thursday, and we're going to have a vote on all this, and we can have many discussions beforehand about whether or not we want to change the bylaws. And I'd be glad to be part of a committee that did it, because I've looked at these other neighborhoods, and I will tell you, there's tremendous weaknesses to what Candler Park does. They have to have a motion ahead of time, 30 days ahead of time, to spend $500. Run Summerfest via that method, okay? Run the tour of homes via that method. This neighborhood has a better, in my opinion, superior one. And I would love every board, and I'm not going to be on it very much longer. So, you know, I may have questions about the next board. But the point is, it invests a lot of responsibility in people. It asks you to you ask them to tell you what they're going to do, and then you get to measure and see if they did it. And if you don't like it, you get to go argue with them. And you get to vote them out of office. And that's fine. That's democracy. That is really, really democratic, in my opinion.
Can I
Yes,
ma'am. I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name, but you were one in the second row that asked the question. You said, please answer the question about the vote, which I think Jag just explained it probably better than I could. But the reason I feel very comfortable with my vote that I cast at our board meeting before was because I saw that the process was laid out. I knew that citizen input would be a part of that process. It was an iterative process, and citizens that participated shaped the plan, and they were informed. And I felt like that was a much better representation of the neighborhood sentiment than a vote where people may or may not be as informed as they should be. So for better or for worse, I made a very informed choice in a vote to support this plan and the process that made it, that I think was a very good process. As has been mentioned, nobody's perfect. Yes, there are some things that we could have done better. There's some things that we could have done worse. But I still feel very comfortable about the plan and the vote, and also with the knowledge that anything that moves forward in this plan moving in the next year or two will be discussed by the board. People can come to those meetings, come to planning meetings. They're open. If we choose to go forward with any part of it, it's not going to be just quietly, secretly done without anyone in the community knowing. So I feel very comfortable about the decision we made.
Mr. Corbett, I'll come back to you, Doug, next.
One quick statement, because I have had people ask questions, and I feel like, yeah, I haven't said this tonight, I've said it before, I do feel like there are a lot of really good things in the plan, and I know that people, on the board and people, is it Fraser, that's not on the board, that's on the steering committee, have put in a lot of time and effort into this, and I certainly appreciate and recognize that. And I think, like Doug said, it's not that's not why some of this question and some of this desire for a vote comes up, but just about the process. I know comments have been made at the multiple discussions that I've been to about it's difficult to get people to come out and participate, volunteering their time to be part of this process. As going through getting the signatures on the petition, I've met a lot of people doing that. I've had a number of different people say that they volunteered to do just that, to actually be part of the steering committee in the beginning, and were told, and I don't know what the reasons were behind it, no, they couldn't be part of the process, they were welcome to be part of a focus group, and I just wanted to understand why there wouldn't be more people welcome to be part of the process and include more people from the neighborhood in that, if in fact that is what happened. Two people directly told me that, and then one person indirectly, and I just wanted to ask that question as to why more people couldn't have been included if they volunteered to do that.
Shall I respond, Jennifer? Do you want to respond, or I don't mind responding?
Sorry.
I'm tired of hearing myself.
I just want to respond. I volunteered to participate in the steering committee. I was welcome. No one asked for credential. I participated.
That may be the focus group. That's not the steering committee. There's 9 people on the steering committee. It's 4 board members, 2
okay, what I'm aware of I was at a table with a small group of people and we discussed it.
It was not a focus group.
I didn't pick up the phone and call and ask me.
No, that's okay. That's a fair question.
So I guess I can respond to that. Initially, there was a proposal to do a transportation plan for Virginia-Highland. And in speaking with the city planners and speaking with Aaron Fortner, the consultant who advises Virginia-Highland on planning issues, he suggested that it would be more beneficial to do a master plan because a master plan is one of the key tools that enables neighborhoods to get city funding for projects. So initially there was a series of emails and communications. Are you interested in transportation issues in our neighborhood? If so, please let me know. We're going to form a transportation committee. Then that morphed into, upon further reflection, it seems that it should be broader in scope, address more issues, and morph into a master plan. So the initial people who responded to the transportation email that went out to the community were sent an email saying, okay, we're expanding the scope, we're going to do a master plan, would you like to be involved in that process? And some people indicated, you know, my real focus and interest is in transportation, I'm not as interested in these other topics, please keep me in mind for transportation. So we did that, and throughout that process, I mean, it was back in September, probably even August, we received maybe 30 emails. I didn't receive hundreds of emails. I wasn't reading through different things. And we, actually Aaron Fortner suggested that the size of the steering committee be a manageable number so that it can be an effective body, and that if you have a steering committee of 50, it's no longer a steering committee, and that that's not effective. So the number was agreed upon, and then we reached out to people based on diverse interests, diverse backgrounds, diverse experiences, diverse expertise, and that's what we tried to pull together. And you know, one of the people that was on the steering committee was Michael Elliott. He's not here tonight. He's not on the Virginia-Highland Civic Association board, but he's a professor at Georgia Tech who teaches city planning. So we identified one of the key experts in our neighborhood who is an academic on planning issues to be a part of the steering committee. He seemed like a pretty good fit, and he was on the steering committee. And you know, I apologize if anyone wanted to be on the steering committee and didn't, and wasn't able to be on the steering committee, but it was determined that the committee needed to be a certain size or kept at a certain size in order to be to function and to be effective.
And as part of that, you felt it was appropriate to have 4 board members when you had people outside of the board wanting to be that, because I think that, just in kind of outside looking in, it would seem like certainly you being able to bring in, independent is probably not the right word, because I don't want to say that it's, that has a certain connotation to it, but if you had people who were volunteering to do it and you decided to limit to 9 instead of 11 or 13, which also seemed like manageable numbers, if there were other people outside of the board or directly related to the board, it would seem like that would have been a way to have maybe a more independent steering committee rather than have it be such a high percentage of board members. Or
the steering committee didn't direct the content of the plan. The steering committee helped facilitate the process that was used to develop the plan. So including my daughters who claim vocation in the back, do have time to come to those meetings and do make it a priority. So was it appropriate for me to be on the steering committee? I think it was.
I'm not saying it wasn't appropriate for you, Jennifer. I'm just saying there were people that expressed that they volunteered to do it, were willing to spend the time, and were told no, and that they felt excluded from the process when they wanted to be part of it.
There were many other ways to participate in the process other than being on the steering committee. We had focus groups that talked about specific things. We had an education focus group that included a teacher from Grady, a teacher from Inman, both of whom live in the neighborhood as well. We reached out to diverse people with diverse backgrounds and diverse expertise. The teacher from Grady and the teacher from Inman, I had never met them before. I know they may come to some meetings, but they're not, quote, active in the civic association, and they didn't have any civic association board bias or predisposition to follow our whims. So to me, that's an example of reaching out to people who haven't traditionally been a part of various things that the Civic Association has done, in particular to benefit from their expertise, because who better to provide input on the neighborhood issues that involve the schools than teachers at the schools who live in the neighborhood. So we were not talking about should AP Math be taught in 10th grade versus 11. That's not a neighborhood issue.
I understand, but ultimately when you're receiving the feedback from the website and from whatever other avenues you got, whether it's the focus groups or the Aurora Coffee, at some point the steering committee is helping to determine, are they not, what stays in, what gets added, what comes out. I mean, it's not just Mark and Maine that did that. Was that not the steering committee that helped to drive that process?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so that's I think where the question comes in. Would it have benefited more to have people outside to really be part of that process?
I think there were probably 11 different configurations of a steering committee that would have been good steering committees, and that some of that came down to things like who responded in a certain timely way, and this person's already volunteered. Some of that really comes down to less than perfect design and who expressed the more forceful interest the quicker. But I do think it was, by and large, done very well. And I don't see the conflict of interest because I've never understood that argument. You think the board is neutral on this extremely labor-intensive, extremely difficult, extremely time-consuming plan? The 4 people that are on it are the 4 members of the steering committee, and I will, at risk of whatever, put myself on it, who have devoted consistently the most intense interest in a range of theoretical planning issues as they apply to this neighborhood before the master plan ever started. Jess Wyndham has specific academic credentials in it and is involved in a whole host of activities that are directly on point. Ms. Keenan has similar background and is a lawyer. I've done a time anyway. So I'm just saying, I think those are logical people to put on.
I'm not questioning anybody's individual credentials, Jack. I'm just saying having it limited to 9 versus 11 or 13.
At some point, everybody's
outside the board.
Whatever the number is, to be fair, that you have a very good point. But no matter what number we could have chosen, people were going to be excluded because there was, by the nature of having a limited number.
And we wanted everybody, and we tried to get everybody to come to a focus group and do other things that express interest. And as I said to you at our meeting, if I'd known you were in the neighborhood and knew this background, I would have made sure that I would have formally invited you to have a much more active role. We're not worried about disagreement. We think it makes a stronger product. We have a planning committee that goes at each other hammer and tongs half the time, and it's fine. It makes for a better discussion and a better outcome and a more informed group. As I was saying to Mr. Conrad, I don't want to paper over them. I want to bring them out and understand them. So I think you can always criticize the outcome. I think it was okay. I mean, the people that are on it were some credential, every one of them, and the people in the focus group were pretty intense.
The only reason I bring the point up, Jack, is it's the people making the decisions about what's in the plan are the ones that voted on the plan, in large part. And that's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah.
I guess there's a problem.
What's the problem with that? Mr. Morris.
I'm Jim Morris. I can't vote for it.
I live on 1109 North. I was on the steering committee. First of all, I welcome the participation to help. They were the ones that were paying for it, so I wanted to hear what do they want to have come out of this. They wanted to have a fair process. I think the steering committee was the body that made sure that happened. I think because there was a lot of us that had pulled in various focus groups who identified, hey, we need to talk to this person about education. So I don't feel that the board was steering content, or even the steering committee was steering content. That came from the surveys. And I think the surveys did a very good job of providing us with that input we needed to form into a plan.
Mr. Hartman, you've been patiently waiting to explain.
I have my docs that I have to grade when I get home tonight, so it looks like I get there. So I didn't come to the meeting actually thinking we were going to get to vote, but I thought just for the sake of it, I didn't have one of those magic 8 balls. So I went to the internet, which is kind of like when I put in the question, will the VHCA board alter its plan to allow a vote? And I put in yes and no, and what it came back and said is, maybe if you agree to an open tab at Moe's and Joe's after the meeting.
No.
So that's what I'm saying.
Well, sir, I appreciate the vote. We're going to need to get a committee to talk about whether it's George's or Moe's and Joe's. This is nothing as simple as easy. But it's a whole decision. Now you're talking. By the way, we'll be considering one of those options when I leave here. Ms. Appleton, did you put your hand up? Were you waving in dismay or joy? Mr. Burrow, did you move your hand up, sir?
No, I didn't. But I would like to have you call on me. It sounded like to me what you kind of just said, not that I interpreted it, you didn't say, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but that the folks that do the work, going to volunteer, get on the board, that might have an agenda, whether it's preservation or a certain style of neighborhood, sort of almost what you're saying is get to say what happens. I mean, because we don't vote, you do the voting, we will take our input, but you folks are doing the work. So in a sense, you say you basically say you don't think you shouldn't be neutral, right? So I guess that's part of it. I think it's kind of what I heard David getting at, is that if you have, that maybe people have, by definition, they have desires, they decide they're going to volunteer, get on the board, and make things happen that they want to see in the neighborhood. Whether or not most people agree with that or not. I think that's kind of what some people might be thinking, for better or for worse. And I'm not trying to be critical, I'm just saying that's how it's being interpreted by some.
I'm sure it can be interpreted that way. I would say there's some things we were never neutral about. That the process was open. That we tried to contact everybody we could with every reasonable set of return that we thought would work. That we were willing to spend gobs of time trying to talk to people anywhere, anytime about it. Still remain interested in doing that. That we read every single comment that went on social media. Even though I do think it was a terrible forum for discussing it, that we wrote tons of responses back from it, that we really tried to understand what folks were saying and to explain what the goals of the plan were and to explain the difference between policy. There's a huge amount of time was spent on, boy, if there's something I would criticize about the way we did this, it would be that I would have led off with a huge explanation of what city policy was and what could be changed and what could not be changed by this group, this plan, any plan. So that might have really gotten a lot more focus in there. So there's some things we've learned that we'll do differently and better. But I think we were scrupulously neutral about the process and the fairness. And we certainly did try to pick people who knew the most about it. If you want to tell me that we would have a safety plan in Virginia-Highland, but we wouldn't invite Mr. Wolfinger or Ms. Berg because they have had either current or past board membership and they wouldn't be neutral, I think that's what I'm talking about. Invite people you think that are spot on the topics you hope, and not your friends, not you're looking for competence. I hope that's it. I mean, I'm real interested in fairness and outcome.
Well, and I'd like to add to what Jack said. agenda into this process. First of all, there was no ability to do that. The board here is not unified on all issues. For example, I think accessory structures are fine. I don't care if all of my neighbors have apartments in their garages. Personally, I don't care. I think it'd be great. I'd love to have an in-law suite in my garage. That's my personal opinion. Exactly. That is not shared by many of my fellow board members. That is not shared by many members who live in Virginia-Highland. And guess what? That's not in the plan. I didn't have the ability to impose my view that accessory dwellings should be allowed. I think that's a great idea. It's not in the plan. So to think that steering committee members, board members, anyone had the desire, let alone the ability, to impose their own personal preference into the plan is just a faulty premise. People know that Lola's been involved in exploring historic designation, and it's been focused in different ways, neighborhood-wide, section-wide. Historic designation is not in the master plan. So we can, each board member here, each steering committee member can point to something that they personally think would be great in this neighborhood that isn't in the plan. What everyone was unified in was the belief that a master plan would be a benefit to our community. And one of the primary reasons it would be a benefit to the community is because it will enable us to get funding for projects in our neighborhood. Alex Wan specifically told us before we started this process, if you all don't have a master plan, you're going to be in the back of the line when it comes to bond issuances and money that's available for public improvements, community improvements. So we were all unified in our desire to have a master plan to make sure that our community didn't lose its place in line to get city funding. So that's, I think, about the only thing we were unified in. The personal beliefs of what is best for our neighborhood are diverse. And the master plan doesn't reflect personal agendas, personal beliefs of board members, steering committee members. It reflects the input that we received and the information that we had on existing city policy.
So I think what I'm hearing the board say, and I'd like to thank you, is that you try to balance a representative input, right? You selected community members who brought particular expertise to bear on the plan, and you tried to balance having a functional committee, having a wide range of the constituencies that represent the Highlands through the focus group as well as the steering committee. And I loved what you did, and I thank you very much for all the time you spent doing that, because I know you could have spent it in a million other ways. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And if I may make a comment, if David will indulge me, I've had to get up many times at the meeting, I've laughed, I've smirked. It's all been in relation to my daughters. So for anyone who watches the video at any later time, please know that my personal performance here and the various funny faces I've made throughout this process have not been reflective of comments made, but have rather been reflective of these two cute and seemingly impatient little girls.
That is the opinion of the board that they are cute. I'm sorry, sir, did you have your hand up? Mr. Weisman, no? Any further comments from anyone? I will remind all, in case anybody has missed it, that this is on the agenda of the NPUF, where, as in Virginia-Highland, if you live here, you're in. On a week from Monday, and you're very welcome to come. It's at Hillside. It is not a binding recommendation, but it is really, there will be, if anyone makes a motion to vote, there will be a vote. I suspect somebody will make such a motion, and I urge you to come. I also want to point another thing out. All this said, Mr. Fortner is still has gotten comments back from the city planners. You know, if anybody has anything new or unsaid about this plan, any revelation about it, all the way through plan, one thing we might have done a better job too is explaining what the plan is. There will be a version of it that will go forward. But it is the most living of documents in the sense that it's capable of being amended as we go through the next few years. And I'm pretty sure that future boards may have something to say about it, as they should. And future citizens can have a lot of impact on that, and I hope they will, because some of these things will occur with or without us. Some may or may not occur, no matter what we do with them. So I appreciate that. In fact, Mr. Hartman and anyone else, Mr. Corbett, if you're interested in looking at bylaw changes, I have a number. Ms. Ferraro's here who worked on those. And I have a number that I'd like to make that we didn't do because we were trying to keep it simple. But I thank everybody for coming. If there are no further comments, I thank you all very, very much for coming. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
I'm the last person that wants to talk about taxes.
You would want to talk about
Thank you so much.